one, and I'm sure Tanya will be more than happy to answer. All right, so if everybody could just mute themselves, and Tanya, it is all yours.
Okay, let me present. Hold on.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, perfect. All right. So I just took a bunch of screenshots. Well, not these, just to show in general where to start off from. So usually it's always going to be, of course, micros, totals, the batch totals against LTM. So the first thing you always look at is micros, because are you guys able to see this screen?
Yep.
With the batch, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm not that familiar when it comes to presenting, so just let me know if you guys don't see anything. So for example, I found this report that I had saved where, as you can tell, it's a partial batch. So, and this is, customers don't always know that they have a partial batch happening because they don't always look at their transfer report, or it's always, disabled. So it's always gonna be up to you to look at the micros first. So if you open up a batch and it's partial like this, that just means that that's the money that they're missing. Or something like this, where you see the letter D, meaning it was omitted by driver. Or
I think you need to scroll down on your presentation.
this.
I didn't see the omits that you were just referring to.
Okay. Can you see it now or no?
No. No, it's still like frozen on the.
Oh, my bad.
Frozen, but
Can
it's
you
on
guys,
the.
okay,
There
can
you
guys
go.
see it now?
There you go. Yep.
There you go. Okay. All right. Does everyone see this? The letter D?
Yep.
Okay. So partial batch, the D meaning it was omitted by driver, or this one, which is we did it, or sometimes a customer does it and they don't know what that means. They think it's just going to skip it, but they're still going to get their money. As you can see, this one has a few. So no matter how much it is, always look at the micros batch first. And even if it's settled, like for example, you guys see this right here, where it's the offline authorization code, where it starts with 44 and ends with 44. Just because it says settled here, that does not mean anything, because there's been issues where the micros will accept it, but LTM, once it hits LTM, it gets declined. So let me see here. Probably just going to be like the shortest one because it's really easy just to look it up. Okay.
So Tanya, if you're presenting, you may want to share your whole screen, because if you move to a different screen, it doesn't follow perfect.
I did do the whole screen. That's the weird thing. It's like I did all 3 screens, but like I said, this is new for me.
Yeah, I did the entire screen.
Yeah, I did the entire screen. That's weird. Okay. Look up Adobe. Does anyone have any questions so far? Did I miss anything?
No, not yet.
I'm gonna assume no. Okay. So once you always look at the micros batch first. In this case, obviously 3700, because once it goes to the pin pad, it goes to the micro system and then goes to LTM. If it's Symphony, then you have to look at a regular Symphony report, because they don't have batch on the POS. They batch straight at the pin pad to LTM. So in this case, obviously 3700. If they're missing money, always look at that first, and of course settle it. And then you go into, I'm just going to do a random location, my bad. Only because I've been dealing with Balthazar a lot, so. Okay, which day was it? All right, well, in this case, you can see they're separated. This one right here. It's just MasterCard, Discover, and Visa. Not all locations are going to have their Amex Go separately, but this, for example, does. In this case, this site had an issue where they were missing a certain amount of money. And what happened was there was a rekey that was done. But the one thing you have to remember is that if there's ever any missing money and the micros is correct and the shift 4 is not, but if there was a rekey done, then you have to remember who did the rekey. Was it you? And if it was you, then that means did you include the tips? Because the one thing shift 4 is not aware of is that whatever money they get, that's all whatever they see, that's all they're going to rekey. They don't see the tips because, again, if it was only authorized on the pin pad and omitted, they only see the authorization. So if they see a card that was charged for $20 and there was a $5 tip and you don't tell them, they're only going to charge it for $20. And that's what happened with this customer. They were given a rekey of just the authorized amount, but the tips were not included. So they were missing, I think, a little over 20 grand. And that, of course, falls on us because it's our job to tell shift 4, payment support, that there's a tip. They are not aware that the tip amount, doesn't reach them if it's only authorized. Any questions so far? I'm gonna assume no. Yeah, hold on. Where is it? So let me just go back to this as I can't find the file. Okay. Of course, if there's ever, for example, this report, which I showed, see all these 4 4s. Obviously, whoever did this omission, they had to omit this one. But for some reason, the micros lets this one in and then lets this one in. Again, like I mentioned before, just because you didn't omit it and it was an offline code, that doesn't mean that it reached LTM. LTM, more often than not, will decline it. And because the customer only goes by this, and not every customer has access to LTM or refuses to use LTM, they're just going to assume these went through because we're saying it went through and they're saying it went through. So it's up to you to go back into LTM. That's it. And make sure you're looking at current transactions. That's where they're going to sit and make sure this is checked off. Like perfect. There's like 2 right here from earlier this year. They have declined. And even though it says sale, if it's in red, then it got declined. This is where majority of the cards are going to sit. Even if you have a customer that says, oh, but what about all these extra authorizations? That doesn't necessarily mean that those are cards that were declined or omitted, because you also have to remember in the restaurant setting, there's also server error. So the customer sometimes going to get freaked out and say, where's all this money that I'm missing here? Am I supposed to be due that? You have to make sure that the customer, they have access to LTM. They need to do their comparison and see if were these transactions that they actually did, or were these ones that, the servers made a mistake and they just left them as an authorization. Because as we know, a lot of servers do that all the time. So unless it's a card that's like recent and we can look into the batch, but if it's something from like 2-3 years ago, something like that is on to the customer. That's not on you to do. So only focus on the most recent transactions that are declined and just sitting in LTM. Any questions so far?
I do have a comment.
Okay.
I most certainly agree with you as I'm doing reconciliation of if it's sitting in authorization and we don't know if it's actually a error on our end or if it's a server error, I wouldn't just go and push those through. I would definitely, look into it, look into the journal and see if it's a valid authorization or if it's a server error.
No, that's what I mean. If it's a server error if it's something recent, you have to look into it. But if it's something from like 2-3 years ago and the customer's running why it's not being pushed, you have to tell them, like, they freak out and they think, oh, did I just lose that money? And it's like, no, because most not all the time, but most of the time it is usually server error, because you're going to see that here, because if it was something from 2 years ago and he didn't notice it then, that means it never even made it to his batch. Because if he's reaching out to you now and saying, hey, I missed money. Well, if you didn't reach out to me 2 years ago, more often than not, that's because it was an authorization that was a mistake. Not all the time, of course. But I'm sorry. Did I make it seem like that I was pushing it through? Is that what I said?
No,
Okay.
basically I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying
Oh,
that's
okay.
important for people to know.
Yeah. Again, don't bother yourself with like old ones. Again, if it's something, that's how I explain it to the customer. If you didn't notice it then, that means it was just a server error, and it can always manually be removed, like something like this where it says void right here. That can be removed too. Most of the time when you see a transaction that was, when you have lost authorizations and they call in and they say, oh, the authorization fell off today and I want to receive the amount. In LTM here, it's always going to show up as a void because it was done the day of and the authorization code fell off. And eventually after a certain amount of time, it does expire. So it just gets voided. That doesn't mean that the customer voided it. It's just because the authorization code fell off as well. And that could be, again, part of the reason why they're missing money. Were there any other questions? Let me know so I know not like skipping any parts. I'm sorry, guys. Just trying to find the right report that I had. This one. Okay. So one of the things that we have to also remember, aside from when you omit the record yourself, is that you do have maybe like a 99% success rate of retrieving it. Because if you omitted it, it just means, it was done offline and the system's just trying to protect itself and not, process it. But if it's usually done where the driver omits it more often than not as well, it means that it was declined because there's insufficient funds or if it was a card that was fraud. So if this is done and the batch settles and then the customer says, I'm missing money, that doesn't mean obviously that someone was on site and they omitted it themselves. It's the driver, but they're not always aware because a transfer report will say, oh, the batch is settled, So you're going to have to also tell the customer that there's a chance that this is money they're not going to get. And that could be the reason why their deposit issue or in comparison to the micros report. Like with this one, these all had just omitted by driver. If I'm not mistaken, I think all of them were declined. And as you can see, offline, but it went through, and this one did not. Okay.
Hey, just to interject here for a minute. Hey, Brent, I know you recently had a reconciliation ticket. If you still have questions, I mean, now would be like a great time to bring it up.
What kind of ticket was it?
I will have to look back in the Slack channel for when that was. I'll look for it while you're presenting. I'll come back with a question if I have one about it. Okay.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so again, just to recap, because again, batch recon is pretty easy. As long as you're making sure you look at the micros report first, make sure nothing is omitted, nothing is partial, and nothing was declined. And again, the second you see offline transactions in the batch, and even if it's settled, then that more than likely is going to be your indicator where the deposit issue is. And then you always go into LTM and see what's going on. And also there is, I wish I had a good example of it, but there will be times where, depending on the EOD cutoff, if they do transactions like right after or like after their business day ends, if their micro set to for their business days to end at midnight and they do a transaction at 1, sometimes it's going to go into the next day's batch. So that's also something to consider. So if you're going to look at a batch from the 6th and they're missing $20, see if the $20 is on the 7th, because sometimes it could be in there. And of course, with the way LTM is, they take the business date to be the same as the batch date. So this will be technically for the 5th, but the LTM labels it as the 6th. So there's also that too. Sometimes micros customers don't know that. So they make the assumption that they're missing money or they're over because they're looking at the wrong date. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Troy.
All right, so say the packs from like what's the latest date they can get their money from? Like say if you go in and then it's like a date from maybe September 1st or like what's the cutoff date again? Was it 2 weeks?
What do you
Like say I go into a site and the back shipping set up for a while.
Oh,
that-
okay, okay.
Yeah, so what's the latest they can get the money?
Anything after 30 days is gonna.
Yeah.
is
30
gonna
days?
Is
So
anything after
they-
30 days is gonna trigger chargebacks.
So
Oh.
they take 30 days. The most they will do is 90, but they don't suggest it. But 30 days is it's always good. But even then, even on the 30th day, they're always going to be open to chargebacks. But remember, we have nothing to do with that. You
Right.
can always tell them like, hey, this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
But I'm only going to do it because if you're aware of the risk of the chargebacks, you know what I
Okay.
mean? So when
Gotcha.
it's like a week or two, that's nothing. You could settle that. But if it's beyond that, where someone's dined literally 29 days ago and they're going to see the charge, you have to let the customer know because they go into a blind thinking the guests don't care. So you
Right.
have to let them know if I do this, then you're going to get a bunch of phone calls. So.
Mhm.
And again, that's something you always want to notate in your ticket as well, that if you do old batches, put it into the notes that the customer wanted that, because again, it's the older they are, the more of us they are with the customers, and like the trust they have and the chargebacks.
Okay. Gotcha.
Does go ahead, Mike.
All right. So what John had mentioned earlier, I believe what we're referring to is something that happened on Saturday.
Okay.
And it's where they could not run their checkout without someone who was, all right, I'm going to read this off. A server goes to the POS and enters all their tips. They cannot run their checkout without doing so. So at that point, the PS or Micros is not registered this. Could it possibly be that those transactions are created and closed on SkyTab Mobile? And also it was closed with a tip versus tip adjusted later at batch. So I don't understand a tip adjusted later at batch. How does that happen?
Wait, did they get that error on the POS or on the SkyTab?
So what Brent was dealing with was in short, right? And Brent, correct me if I'm wrong, was that Micros was significantly less in contrast to LTM. LTM was much
More.
higher, right?
Right.
Every single day.
Yeah. Yes.
So what I was telling Brent that day was that I believe the issue could be that maybe they were processing SkyTabs, and maybe the SkyTab mobiles were processing separately, which because it doesn't flow through Micros, causing LTM to always be higher. So like, how would you handle a scenario like that, Tanya, where LTM was higher than Micros?
Well, then I will have to first confirm that were they even using LTM? I mean, not LTM.
They were. Yes,
SkyTab.
they did have SkyTab. Yes, ma'am.
And then also, because if I'm not mistaken, I thought that those amounts are supposed to be separate in LTM. Like they're not supposed to be merged. So then that might be more of a config thing because it's not supposed to be this, with the POS sales, basically.
So like if I'm looking at your screen now, like for the 10th, there's two batches for the 10th, Tuesday. Would one of those, for example, be the mobile and the other one be Micros?
No, because for SkyTab, you find those batch reports in LBI. Because again, when you do a transaction on the SkyTab, they have their own batch report that's separate from Micros.
And you said that's LBI?
LBI, yeah. Lighthouse Lighthouse Business Manager.
Okay, I'll have to get access, or someone can show me that on another time.
Yeah, you could go through it. It's been a minute.
I've already seen one thing.
It's through Titan.
Oh, okay.
I think it's web. I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Lighthouse.
Yeah, right here. See, so you just go into like if this is the customer you're going to, you go to web, Lighthouse, and then you just press login, and then it takes you to like it already logs you in, and then you can look at the SkyTab reports. Because again, it's basically like an external, like a standalone. You know what I mean? It's not merged with the Micros. So if they did do transactions on there, then that's that's where the, you know, the discrepancy is, because it did
Okay.
something that's separate from the POS.
All right. And I had a second question. When you were on your original LTM page, you
Mhm.
went up to where the devices are, where we looked at EMV, and you
Okay.
clicked on a miscellaneous utilities. I don't have that option.
Oh, I don't know why mine is like that. When you first sign in, you have to go here, and then I put in the, you know, like the serial number. That's, is everyone else's different?
I
Um,
I just don't have. I don't under settings. All I have is EMV.
So the reason why she has that is because she's logged in under account 0. It's
Right,
just a different
Yeah.
login.
yeah,
Okay.
it's just on
Yeah.
account 0 and you can just enter the serial number like she's got, Brett. We just sign in as the serial number.
Oh, okay.
That's the reason why it's different, Brett. It's the same info, it's just.
Yeah, it's
little-
really just looking up, you know, looking up the
Right.
customers. That's it.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
see, look, so look, Archie Morris. Yeah, that's it really. So whatever
Okay.
setting that you were doing, it's really just logging into this, and of course, you know, current transaction, archive batches.
Okay. I
Yeah.
understand that. So when you went, you didn't put a serial number in at the login page. You put 0.
If you look
Account
here, my
0.
account is 0. Yeah,
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
no problem.
And the Titan thing, thank you. I had no idea.
Yeah,
About
I
Much.
learned. JP showed me that a while ago, so now I taught you. Does anyone else have any other questions? I mean, I'm gonna assume everyone knows how to pretty much do searches in LTM, right?
Yes, I do.
Like, okay, like in regards to, you know, like archive batches, for example. If they're missing a specific amount, you know, you just put in, I don't know why that amount's there. I mean, it's definitely easier when it's just that they say it's just one card, and then you don't have to go through the whole craziness of like go looking through the batches or whatever. If it's just one card, just put the amount in here that they're saying it's the, you know, like missing between LTM and micros, then you could just do that, because sometimes, you know, what is it, work smarter not harder. You don't have to go through all this. If it's one card, or if you see that it's 2 cards missing, then just look for the amounts there. You don't always have to, you know, look through every batch report. Are there any other questions?
No.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. All right, I think that's about it, because again, like I said, it is pretty easy. As long as you have LTM micros, and of course, you can go a step further if you would like, and look at,
Activity.
where is it? Yeah, there you go. I'm like brain farting. Activity deposits. If you will see, for example, this random location, they have 2 here, deposit date, 2 deposit dates, and then 2 amounts. So if they're saying, oh, I'm supposed to get 20 grand, but you only see 10, well, add up both deposit dates. I'm sorry, I apologize, batch dates. So for example, this one is from the 8th and this one's also from the 8th, then add up both. Don't just think one is the deposit amount. If they're ever saying, oh, I'm missing money, then there's also fees that they get taken out. So you have to consider that as well, which is why sometimes you're going to if everything matches, then that's when you're going to have to end up calling payment support and then find out if there was anything in collections, or if it was a fee, because sometimes customers don't always know that they pay a fee at a certain amount every month. So you could always do that, which is sometimes, again, also easier than going into LTM and doing everything. If you think everything matches, then the last resort will always be payment support.
Maybe just to conclude here, Tanya, we show them the gateway settings so that people see what time the batching on the back end is being done.
Where is that? Right here. So remember, guys, micros always has to close out first, because shift 4 can't do anything until, especially for 3700, it has to go on through the micros first. So if the micros EOD is at 3, then the shift 4 has to be at 4. It can't be the same. It can't be like close to each other. It has to be at least an hour or more. But so for example, this one is at 4 and their end of day is at 4, and then the auto close is at 5. So the micros has to close out before then. If you have the shift 4 closing out before micros, then that's going to cause some issues. And sometimes they always have it at some places without realizing it, have it at the same time or close together. So make sure with 3700 you check the end of day time against here, the gateway settings, which you could find in the general tab on this side right here. If you guys can see me highlighted, like right here. Go ahead.
All right, and you said issues will happen. For those that are not aware, what issues would happen if the time was 30 minutes or right there at the same time? What issues would happen?
So what I have seen is that they start merging deposits and batches. That's what I've seen. Or they just hang there. So because of that, it's very hard for the site themselves to reconcile. And again, you don't see it as often because when they first get set up, the micros installers always tell shift 4 to have it an hour or so after. But when you do see it, you're going to start seeing merged batches or batches. I've seen a site where it would just like sit there, you know, or transactions that are, I guess some of them, I think I saw one that didn't have like the tips included. So there's always going to be some kind of a weird issue if the shift 4 goes out before the micros does.
And for a lot of people that don't know, just to conclude, our sites are terrible at reconciling. They expect us to do their accounting. So having this type of knowledge in your back pockets is always going to go a lot further.
Yeah, especially if they call shift 4 first.
Yeah, micro should always batch an hour before the end of day on the back end.
And if you ever have a site that says, "Oh, I had," I guess I've been hearing a lot of, is where the shift, they'll call, because again, I know we all are shift 4, but they'll call payment support first, and payment support because again they don't understand how tips are. Even people, they just don't understand the hospitality, environment. They don't know how tips work, so they will close it out from the micro side. And then what happens on the shift? The shift 4 side, and then the micros, that batch is just sitting there. So if you go to settle it, thinking, oh, the customer's calling me for a pending batch, and then I go to settle it, what's going to happen is that the customer's going to get charged twice, but this time with the tip. So if you think that the customer did it, or make sure that you call shift 4, make sure that there's nothing sitting if it's already been batched out from the shift 4 side. If they did do that, it's fine. It's just going to create more work for you. What you do is save the batch report from the micros, and then you have to start a rekey case and then tell them you only want the tips rekeyed. And then you're going to have to mark the batch as transferred in the micro so that way it doesn't hold up future batches. But again, and if that ever happens, you have to press it, let the customer know that they can never do that. Micros should always be first, But again, all you have to, it's just going to be a simple rekey. I've been hearing a lot of customer service saying that they don't know that it's supposed to go out through micros first. So, and then ends up, the customer will get double charged because the micros itself will stop a card from being double charged if it's the same card, the same day, the same amount. But if shift 4 charges them and then the micros does, the micros is not going to see it as a double charge. It's just going to see it as a regular batch. So there's a limit to when we can double charge. If it's on the micros, it will omit it, or it'll by the driver, or it'll hang it up and then we have to omit it. But if shift 4 does it first and then we do it, then you're going to end up with a whole bunch of double charges, and then you're going to have to do a rekey already on a refund. So always make sure if the customer has reached out to PS first. All right, I think that's about it. If I missed anything, please let me know.
All right. Well, we're at the limit, guys. If anybody has any questions or things that come up after the fact, just send a DM to Tanya, myself, and Tina, and we could answer them. But we do have a hard stop at 4 o'clock. So Brent, send us a slide DM with whatever questions you got. I appreciate everyone's time. Off till next week to our next meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tanya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.